This is Brad A. Milford with the Unlimited Business Wisdom Podcast, where business owners share their wisdom. It's short and to the point because we respect people's time and because we all know that transforming possibility happens super fast and it leads to sustainable and lasting results. So let's get to it. Question number one. In a few sentences, Roberta, tell me who you are and what you do.
Well, I am the talent maximizer, and I help organizations hire and keep the best people.
Love it. Talent maximizer, you said.
Yes.
Powerful stuff. I'm dying to get into that a little bit more. Very succinct, though. I love the very clear and focused answer. After 25 years as a consultant, I imagine that comes pretty easily to you today.
Well, I'm always tweaking it, so I never know what I'm going to say until I'm asked.
I love it. Question number two, Roberta. What's the best thing about being in business?
The best thing about being in business for yourself is the freedom to work when you want and how you want to work. And so having also worked in the corporate side for a number of years, being on this side is really a lot of fun.
Love it. And of course, for you, having the best talent around you, right?
Yes, I always work with the best people that I can find, and that's why I know the difference. And I know what it's like when you have really great people that you're working with, even as a consultant. And that's why I encourage my clients to make sure that they hire and keep the best.
Absolutely love it. Thank you. Question number three. We're zipping through these. We're going to get to some wisdom really fast. I love it. Question number three. We hear from other business owners. They're getting so much business. Yes, so much business that sometimes the chaos causes overwhelm. Would you be willing to share your thoughts about that, Roberta?
Well, I don't think there's anything, more exciting than having too much business, right? And so when that happens, you just need to get super organized and super focused and figure out, what are the 2 or 3 things that I need to move forward a mile rather than the 10 things that I need to move forward an inch, and really, hit those 3 things out of the park.
Super organized and super focused. There's no way I could love those 2 words more. Thank you. Question number 4, Roberta. What other successful business owners, more specifically like yourself, of course, should be on the Unlimited Wisdom Podcast?
Well, I think you should have Ann Latham on. She has a new book, and she is the world's expert on clarity. And I think she'd make an incredible guest.
You're picking all my favorite words, Roberta.
Well, since I haven't read your questions, I'm just winging it.
I love it. I absolutely love it. All right, let's get to the crux of this. I'm dying to hear from you with all the experience that you bring to the table. I'm loving our conversation and looking forward to hearing what piece of wisdom you'd share with other business owners.
Well, I would share with other business owners to, again, really make sure that they have the right people in the right roles right now. We all know that it's extremely hard to find great people. And, we're reading about the Great Resignation, and it's like in the headlines left and right. And, all this talk about companies losing these great people. But the reality is that people don't work for companies, they work for people. And so if you want to be able to keep these great people, you have to give them something that no one else can. And in my opinion, that something is great leadership. Because from where I sit, it's very rare. And so when you have that in your life, you stick with it and you stay with that person and you follow them wherever they go.
There's no way I could love that more. Let's talk leadership, Roberta, one of your areas of expertise. What, in all these years you've been doing this, what are some of the finest points that you've come across? We all know, I think we all know, there's no question there that there's a lot of toxicity out there in the world today still. What do you think? What are some of the challenges out there, and how do you help solve that issue?
Well, I mean, again, I think one of the biggest challenges right now is keeping people. Everybody's talking about, oh, how do I hire people? Well, I tell them, don't lose them in the first place. And, if you're growing, then you need to be what I call a magnetic organization, and you have to have magnetic leaders. It's a lot easier to attract people to you. And the problem is, as you're bringing up the word toxicity, is that many people are repelling talent. And that's a big problem. And a lot of your listeners probably already know who those people are, yet they're afraid to let them go because they think, oh my gosh, how am I going to hire more people? But if you make these decisions and you make these changes, you won't have to worry about losing more people.
Powerful, powerful stuff. So it's not only just finding what I hear you saying, it's not only just finding the talent, it's also sustaining the talent and the leadership that it takes to do that.
Yes, and I wrote extensively about that in my book, Evergreen Talent, which actually came out last February, before, in the middle of the pandemic. At a time when most people were like, I'm not really interested in this topic, but right now, this topic is very, very relevant, and it's being reflected in the number of books that are going out the door on this topic.
So I'm really interested, and you opened up the topic a little bit, this great resignation that everybody's talking about. Are you willing to share just some thoughts based on your experience and expertise?
Sure. I mean, look, I think during this pandemic, I think a lot of mistakes have been made. Companies have, ignored the people side of the business for years. And that became very clear during the pandemic. And, many leaders were not checking in with their people. They weren't asking them, like, how are you doing? How's it going? Like, what can I do to help you? They were so focused on, we got to hit our numbers. Like, are you really working? I know you're at home. And so, a lot of people felt very disconnected. And now that some, companies are asking them to come back to the office and they don't want to go back, these organizations are having a really difficult time explaining exactly why these people need to come back. And so, we're seeing that when people are getting offers, if some form of remote work isn't part of that, people are saying, you know what, I'm going to take a pass. I'm going to wait until something comes up that allows me to work the way I want to work.
Really important. I definitely see the change as many people do.
Yeah, and if you read today's Wall Street Journal, there was a whole article today about Gen Z and how Gen Z really wants much more control over their schedule. And since this is the latest generation to enter the workforce and one that's in high demand right now, employers need to wake up and kind of revisit the way they try to engage people, because the old ways for the millennials, who, let's be real, are not that old, they're already out of vogue. So there's going to be a lot of changes coming up in the next year or two. I see that in the workplace.
I have seen the cycles. I also stay abreast of them. Multiple cycles I've seen already, and throughout my career, in the generationally. Shocking and surprisingly, but I feel it. I feel the changes. What are some of the biggest?
I actually feel like I have an inside view, as I have two Gen Z children, and both are entering the workforce. So I have a pretty good idea of what's going on in there, right? What they're thinking and the questions that they're asking me as they look for their first jobs.
I'm with you. I consistently ask my son, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Because it's a whole different perspective. I'm with you. Interesting. What are some of the things that people can prepare for if the audience, entrepreneurs, seasoned or new, with regard to talent, which is your specialty, one of your many specialties, I imagine, given the amount of time and experience that you have in the field. What are some of the things that people can do to prepare for obtaining talent and sustaining talent?
Well, the number one thing you can do in terms of trying to get talent in the door is to be prepared to move rapidly. So I'll give you an example. I have a client right now who, I've been working with him, and he emailed me, last week with the subject line touchdown. And he had received 4 job offers in 5 days for VP roles. And so, here's this guy who's in, demand, and the employer that has moved the quickest is the one who's going to get him. And I'm sure there are other companies that he's currently interviewing with, and they're like, yeah, we want you to interview with Stan, but he's on safari. No, you're not going to work with him, but we still want you to talk to him. Well, guess what? This guy's going to be on his own trip by the time Stan gets back.
I love that. Speed is important, I imagine. And I guess to achieve speed, having the right systems and processes in place would be the key to that, I imagine. Yes?
Right. And you have to, everything, all these strategies that were put into place before the pandemic hit, I mean, there's nothing sitting on your shelf that's relevant. So, I work with clients and companies to help develop their talent strategies. And the best part about this is, we throw that binder out. They're like, oh, would you look at this? I'm like, no. Like, this is like looking at instructions on how to use a washing machine that was built in 1925, it's totally irrelevant. So you just have to really look at everything that you're doing, whether it's your talent or your other processes, with a fresh eye. And I'll be honest with you, it's really hard to do that when you're so close to it. So I would encourage your listeners to find other resources, outside people who can help them and prevent them from breathing their own exhaust.
So important. So important. And yet so many people are resistant to that very thing. I'm glad you brought that up.
Here's what I've learned over the years. If you could have done it by yourself, you would have done it already.
Love it. I absolutely love it. There's that gap, right? We don't know what we don't know, and those kinds of things. It's so important. Absolutely love it. Before I shift to ask you about your vacation, is there anything else? Because, and I'm digging here a little bit, Roberta, because I know you have 6 books, right? And so I'll ask how people can get in touch with you and your recommendation, but would you like to share a little bit more about some of the things that you've walked through and some of the amazing accomplishments that you've achieved? I'd love to hear about a few of those.
Well, sure. Speaking of books, I have a new book because it seems like I'm writing a book every year. I just love to observe the world, and I see so many things, and having worked with so many people in different industries, have a fairly good finger on the pulse of things. And my latest book is called Can We Talk? And that's about the 7 principles for managing difficult conversations at work. And one of the things that I noticed during the pandemic, which is when I wrote this book, is that a lot of these conversations that need to be happening at work are not happening. And so what's happening is that things are going from bad to worse. And so I've written this book as a guide for anybody, whether it's an employee who has to have a conversation with a coworker or their boss, or whether you're a boss and you have to have one of those conversations with your employee. And it's a complete guide as to how to, I've got this framework you can use to make those conversations much easier and more effective.
So needed in the workplace. What a noble cause, and so much needed, Roberta. I appreciate that. Can you give us one little sneak peek, just a little snippet, a little cliffhanger or something?
Yes, I think one of the most important chapters in the book is on clarity. And it's really about getting clear before you have this conversation with someone as to really ultimately what do you want to achieve. Because once you know this, then when you get into the conversation and you come to some kind of mutual agreement, you'll know when to stop. You'll know, because all too often, and I think we're all guilty of this, we ask for something and somebody says, okay, and we keep asking. So it's like after you sell something, you keep selling and then you lose the sale. So, my whole thought process on that is when you're really clear, and you're listening really deeply to the other person, that you'll be a much more effective communicator, and you'll be able to work together to come up with a solution for whatever the problem might be.
I love that. I love how you frame that too, because yes, I do, as a consultant, I do speak about that with regard to sales a lot, is don't talk yourself out of the sale. But I love how you framed that with crucial conversations in your book, Can We Talk Too? That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
You're
So
welcome.
grab the book. We're going to shift. I'm dying to know, you've been in business. You were talking about freedom. You've been in business for yourself for a while. What's the most fun vacation you've ever had?
Well, every vacation is fun, but the last vacation, which was about 3 weeks ago, we took our family to Croatia, and then we flew our kids back to the US, and my husband and I went on to meet friends for a 2.5-week trip in Italy. So that was a lot of fun.
Nice. So you went to Croatia and then to Italy.
Yes.
'Cause I know a lot of the Italians go to Croatia for
They
vacation.
do. They do,
Yeah.
but it's, they're both lovely countries, and, it's lovely to travel with your family, and that's a whole different trip. And then when you go with your friends, that's like maybe a little more relaxing.
So you literally had the vacation. We've all heard people say, I need a vacation from vacation. So you actually did that.
I did. When we got there, it's like, oh, now we're on vacation.
That's wonderful. I love hearing that. Roberta, thanks so much for being on. I really appreciate the investment of your time. What's the website or social media, or how can someone, when somebody listens to this or watches this, how can they get in touch with you?
They can go to Matuson, Matuson, consulting.com. They can send me an invite through LinkedIn and mention your podcast so I know who they are. And they can also follow me on Twitter at Matuson. And they can order my newest book, Can We Talk, on Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, wherever you buy your books.
And I want to say, speaking of clarity, I've been to your website and I love it. Your website is very clear. It's very easy to find things. I want to encourage you, if you're listening and this message reached you, reach out, go to their website, get connected, grab her book, dig down a little bit deep, do some clear depth instead of just the superficial stuff. So Roberta, thank you so much.
And if you want tips on travel, you can reach out as well.
Love it. If you're going to Croatia, reach out. If you're going to Italy, reach out. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much again. This is Brad A. Milford with the Unlimited Business Wisdom Podcast, where business owners, they're making 5, 6, 7 figures, 8 figures. It's not all about the money. It's more about sharing their wisdom globally and creating impact in the world. Thanks for joining us.